I went to Miami University for undergraduate work and graduated with a political science degree, and it was a difficult economy. I had trouble finding a job, so I ended up getting a job as a manager in a fast food restaurant and knew that I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So interestingly enough, I responded to an ad in the Cincinnati Enquirer for the graduate school in public administration at Xavier, and enrolled in that and went through the program and had to do an internship in Blue Ash as part of the program. And they hired me on after that, and I went from there to my first city manager's position and ended up here in Joplin. I think I was motivated by the city manager in Blue Ash when I was there, and had occasion to work with him on different occasions, not real closely, and saw what he did and thought it was exciting and thought that I would be able to do the same thing he did, and that was kind of my inspiration for taking that next step. Growing up, I was always a big history buff, and associated with that is the history of politics and presidents and things like that. And I think that's what drew me to political science. And then I was trying to find something practical to do with that line of study, and it just kind of stood out for me. Public administration seemed like a fit. It was Sunday night, and I'm a big sports fan, so I was getting ready to watch the ESPN Sunday night baseball game. The Cubs were visiting the Red Sox in Boston, and the phone rang, and I didn't get to it in time. I was doing chores and things, trying to get caught up so I could enjoy the game, and it was the fire chief. He had left a message, and I called him directly thereafter, and he said, we've had a bad storm, you need to get into town. And I live in town, but it was a southern portion of the city, and my house was not impacted by the storm. So I called my wife. She was on her way back from Springfield, which is about an hour away, with the kids, and told her to get off the highway. I didn't really know what to expect, but I could tell it was not a good thing. And I left the house wearing shorts and a windbreaker and an old baseball hat, and went up Main Street, and the further I went, the worse it got. And there were down power lines and trees everywhere, and people walking and wandering the streets aimlessly. And I finally had to park my car because I couldn't go any further. And I knew where he was because he had described it to me over the phone. And I had to run 2 or 3 blocks from where I parked the car to where he was at. And the first thing I saw was a green minivan with the windows blown out, and there were 2 deceased citizens right there, 5 feet away from me. And I realized then that this was a pretty serious thing, and that I had to take a deep breath and gather my thoughts and think about what I needed to do next, because it was my responsibility to deal with it. So I ran up here and met him. All this is gone. All these were gone. Everything was gone here. This one house over here, you can see it's kind of a brick.
Yeah.
I think that withstood it. Vocational school is right over here. But you can see that cement pad was right where the church was. We had just crossed the railroad tracks, pulled down there, and went to pull people out. Wow. They did this tree. So then he and the fire chief and I got in his car and wanted to see what we were dealing with. I dealt with storms before, nothing of this magnitude, and I knew I had to have an idea about how extensive it was. So we hopped in his car and went up Main Street, turned right on 20th Street, which is a major thoroughfare in the city, and we looked ahead and saw the vocational school was completely flattened, and the high school, which was nearby, was half gone. And it just got worse the further we went. And we went over the railroad tracks after seeing the high school, and a lady flagged us down saying this church had collapsed off 20th Street, and she said there were people trapped and they needed our help trying to get them out. So we went back there and saw a little bit of everything, and tried to help, pulled some people out of the debris. And we thought we had everyone out. My biggest fear was walking on the remnants of the church, that I was stepping on someone underneath. I was scared to death that I would do that, but you really can't tell unless you hear a sound. So we tried to be as careful as possible and get as many people out as possible, and we thought we had everyone out, and I knew at that point that it was my job to get the plan together, and I would do more good by actually being back at the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, working with my department heads, trying to figure out what do we do, how do we deal with this mess. I don't really remember a whole lot from about 6:30 till about 9:30. And at 9:30, Fire Chief had secured a helicopter from a Tulsa hospital, and we went up with the aid of night vision and saw the damage, and it was indescribable. It was 6 miles long, a quarter of a mile wide to 3/4 of a mile wide throughout the middle of the city, and a third of the city was gone, just gone. And in fact, he asked the helicopter driver to look due east of the city, which is where he lived, in another village nearby, and his house was gone. The fire chief's house was gone. So we got back and went back to the EOC, and finally heard back from my wife that she was all right because there was no phone contact. The towers were all out. And she had found a way to get to my secretary and let her know that she was all right with the kids. So that was one thing I didn't have to worry about. And focused on that, and then started to think ahead about, what do you do next? Because there's different steps to disaster recovery. And it's not like you just finish one and set that aside and go on to the next one. They overlap. So we were thinking about rebuilding as soon as that first day after the storm, and trying to make decisions that would make the rebuilding effort smoother as we went forward with search and rescue and everything else we had to do before that point in time. And the city really came together. My employees did a wonderful job, and the citizens banded together based on their shared experience and the difficulty that we had been through together. And Joplin is known as the standard bearer for disaster management and disaster response in the country as a result of that, and things have gone very well.